Today we're going to be taking a look at the new Tamron 18-400mm lens. This is a new super zoom lens from Tamron. It will be out in a few weeks. It's meant for Canon and Nikon APS-C bodies. Tamron's obviously well known for super zoom lenses, and super zoom lenses in general are lenses that typically go 18-250, 18-300mm or so. This one is notable because it's the first on the market to go 18 all the way to 400, so you get some extra reach with this one that other super zooms are not going to give you. But let's start with a look at the body of the lens. So it's a crop sensor lens that's meant for use on a Canon or Nikon APS-C camera. Although note the sample photos for this video were shot with a full frame Nikon D610 in crop sensor mode, so you could use the lens like that as well. Now the lens is certainly not small, but it's not huge. It's about the same size as many super zooms, even though it does have that extra 100mm reach on it, which is nice. That's mostly due to the fact that it extends quite a bit when you're zooming it in, so it can stay relatively small when not fully zoomed in, which is nice. It's got Tamron's new look to it, which we've seen on Tamron's lenses out in the past year or two. Looks a lot nicer and slicker than their older lenses, so I'm happy to see that new exterior on this one. It's a fully weather sealed lens. We can see here that there's a rubber fitting around the lens mount. So if you toss this on a weather sealed body, you're not going to need to worry about weather and drizzle and so on. It's going to be fine, which is great. We've also got a nice metal mount here, which is good. Overall, very high build quality to this lens. The zoom ring is nice. It's a large rubberized grip on it. It's pretty easy to use, feels quite nice. The focus ring is a little bit lighter than the zoom ring, and it only has a very small throw to it, which is not ideal for heavy manual focus users. However, a lens like this is really not aimed at someone who's going to be doing a lot of manual focusing, so I don't think that's going to be an issue for people using this lens, but just something to keep in mind. We've got a couple switches on the lens. One is a lock that's going to prevent the lens from zooming or extending, which is convenient if you're storing the lens in a bag. We also have an AF/MF switch and an image stabilization switch. Lastly, the lens has a 72mm filter thread at the front, and we have an included lens hood. 18mm, that's going to be great for outdoor landscape shots, anything similar, wide angles to a certain extent. And all the way into 400mm, which is going to give you a lot more detail, going to be great for wildlife and nature, sports games. You'll get some shallow depth of field there as well, and then everything in between. And the fact that this particular lens goes all the way to 400mm as opposed to 300mm where other super zooms top out at is just going to give it an extra advantage in this area as well. So the lens has an aperture of f3.5 to 6.3, which is about what we would expect for a lens like this. Most super zooms are right within this vicinity. At 3.5 on the wide end, that's akin to a kit lens, generally speaking. And at f6.3 on the long end, if you're shooting in low light, that might be a little bit darker than you might prefer. But you'd be surprised at how rarely you'll find yourself shooting at 400mm in low light situations. Usually that would be either nighttime shooting or indoor, maybe indoor sports, in which case you're probably not looking at this lens anyways. So for the most part, you'll find yourself shooting at 400mm in outdoor daytime situations, in which case the aperture is going to be fine. Now you might also think that at f6.3 in the long end, you can't get any nice shallow depth of field, but because it's 400mm is so long, that compensates for that, and you actually can get some really nice, pleasing background blur out of this lens when you're at the extreme focal length, which is really, really nice and definitely adds to the utility of this lens. Another key feature on this lens, particularly considering the extreme focal lengths we can reach with it, is image stabilization, or vibration control as Tamron calls it. So the lens has 2.5 stops of image stabilization built in. You can turn that on and off with the switch on the side that we saw earlier. This is really key, particularly when shooting at those long focal lengths. This is going to stabilize your handheld photos and videos. It's going to allow you to shoot with a lower shutter speed to offset lower light conditions, which may help with the not super fast aperture on this lens. For video usage and shooting handheld video, this is invaluable. Look at this shot here. I'm shooting at 400mm handheld, so the full zoom range here. There's obviously some movement in this shot here, but generally speaking, shooting handheld at 400mm is laughable. The fact that I can get something even passable here is very impressive. And obviously, once we dial it back a little bit and we're not shooting all the way at 400, it gets smoother still. So very, very useful feature in this lens, certainly. So one thing that I discovered that you can actually do quite well with this lens is do close-up shots. So the minimum focusing distance of this lens is 0.5 meters, but when you're zoomed into 400mm, that means you can get some decent close-up shots with the lens. Now, it's definitely not a specialized macro lens, make no mistake, but just another area where it has pretty good utility and just really adds to its jack-of-all-trades nature. Does a decent job at this if you want to do some light close-up work as well. The autofocus system on this lens is also quite strong and particularly fairly accurate. I don't think I experienced any issues of autofocus hunting or incorrectly getting focus. It was pretty bang on all the time. Keep in mind your autofocus performance is also going to vary with the camera body you're using, but from what I could see from the lens, quite good. So I've mentioned that this lens is pretty good at most everything, and that carries over to image quality. It's pretty good. but it's certainly not the sharpest lens out there, and it's not the most free of distortion, chromatic aberration, and the like. Now, this is true for all super zoom lenses. This is not unique to this lens. It's just, at least with today's technology, not possible to make a lens that zooms all the way from 18 mil to 300 or 400 millimeters and have it have the exact same high quality image picture quality that a prime non-zooming lens is going to have. However, I think the picture quality coming out of this lens, this Tamron lens, is absolutely acceptable, absolutely usable, particularly considering that most people who buy super zooms and use them are enthusiast photographers or people who are traveling, not necessarily pro photographers who need the absolute best image quality all the time. The image quality coming out of this lens, I think, is going to be absolutely acceptable to the vast majority of people who would be interested in the lens. So the Tamron 18 to 400 millimeter is definitely one of the best lenses you can get if you're looking for a single package that you don't have to change lenses all the time, but yet it can do most everything very well. With such a huge zoom range, you can easily and quickly switch between wide angle shots and extreme close-ups, or extreme long distance shots. You've got a decent close-up focusing capability. You've got good shallow depth of field when you're shooting at the long end. The vibration control definitely helps in shooting in low light or shooting handheld video, especially at those long focal lengths. You've got a weather-sealed lens with a solid build quality. The list goes on. I think it's going to be particularly attractive for people who are traveling as well. Now, you can order the Tamron 18 to 400 millimeters on our website at www.digidirect.com.au or in one of our stores. We've got stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Chatswood, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBD, and Cannington, Western Australia.